I spent $95,000 on what was supposed to be the trip of my life. My granddaughter's high school graduation, a 2-week tour through the Tuscan countryside, the kind of vacation my late wife used to clip pictures of from National Geographic and tape to the refrigerator. I paid for the villa, the rental cars, the cooking class in Florence, even the custom luggage my daughter-in-law insisted matched the Italian aesthetic. But standing at the curbside check-in at Logan International, my son, with my own grandbaby clinging to his leg, looked at me and said, "Pop, the booking got messed up. There's no seat for you. Maybe next year, all right?" They had planned to leave me behind from the second I wired the money, and by the time the plane was over the Atlantic, my phone had logged 41 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Before I tell you how I made every one of them wish they had never opened that boarding gate without me, take a second and tell me where you're listening from. Drop a comment. Smash that like button if you believe a father isn't an ATM with a pulse. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, because the part where I walk back into my own life with both hands free is the part I think about every single morning when I wake up. My name is Conrad Weicker. I'm 71 years old. Most people in Beacon Hill know me as the quiet old man who walks his terrier past the State House every morning at 6. They don't know I built the third largest commercial real estate firm in New England from a basement office in Quincy with a folding card table and a rotary phone. They don't know that the building I sold to Liberty Mutual in '04 paid for half their kids' private schools indirectly through the property taxes. And my own son, the man I raised, he sure as hell forgot too. I was standing on the sidewalk outside Terminal E, holding 2 oversized hard-shell suitcases that didn't belong to me. They belonged to my daughter-in-law, Melissa. The wheels kept twisting sideways on the rubber matting, and one of the handles had a little gold tag that said her initials in cursive. My own bag, a beat-up leather duffel my wife Ellen had given me for our 30th anniversary, was slung across my shoulder. It felt like an afterthought. That's because I was an afterthought. My son, his name is Patrick, he was 43 years old that morning, but in the spring sunshine he looked like a kid who'd just been handed the keys to his father's Cadillac. He had his hair slicked back the way he used to do for prom pictures, and he was bouncing on his heels in those white leather sneakers that cost more than my first month's rent in Boston. He was waving boarding passes around like he'd earned them. He hadn't earned a damn thing in 20 years that I hadn't paid for. Melissa was on her phone, of course. Some Pilates instructor she follows had posted a story, and she had to react to it before the world ended. She didn't look at me once. The only words she'd said to me all morning were, "Conrad, can you grab those? My back's been a nightmare." She never called me Dad. Patrick had asked me once, early in their marriage, if I minded. I'd said no. I'd lied. My granddaughter, Haley, was the only one who hugged me at the curb. 18 years old, just got accepted to Bowdoin, and she still smelled like the strawberry shampoo she'd used since she was little. She squeezed my arm and whispered, "I'm glad you're coming, Pop-Pop." Then her mother snapped her name and she let go like she'd been caught doing something wrong. I dragged those suitcases through the sliding doors. The air conditioning hit me like a wall. Patrick was already at the Delta counter, charming the gate agent, telling some joke about how his wife packs for a long weekend, like it's a year on the moon. The agent laughed politely, the way you laugh at customers in first class because management is watching. I rolled the bags up behind him. 5 for Florence, connection through Frankfurt, Patrick announced. He fanned out the passports and slid them across the counter like he was dealing blackjack. 5. I counted in my head. Patrick, Melissa, Haley, the 2 younger ones, Cole and Bryn, ages 8 and 10, who were currently sword fighting with rolled-up Cheez-It bags by the window. 5, not 6. The agent, a woman with tired eyes and a name tag that said Renee, started typing. Her smile faltered just slightly. She looked up, looked at Patrick, looked at me standing there with the bags, looked back at her screen. "Sir," she said carefully. I'm only seeing 5 passengers on this reservation. I stepped forward. I started reaching for my wallet, the way a man does when he assumes a clerical error. Patrick had always been a sloppy kid. He used to leave half-eaten sandwiches in his backpack until they grew penicillin. I figured this was the same thing, a typo, a missed click. "Oh, geez," Patrick said, and his voice did this thing. It dropped half an octave like he'd practiced it in the mirror. He turned to me with his face arranged into something that almost resembled regret. "Pop, listen, I gotta tell you something." "Patrick, the booking. Something got crossed up when I made it. Travel agent screwed something up, I don't know, but there's no seat for you on this flight. I'm so sorry. I just found out this morning." He didn't look like he just found out. He looked like a man reciting a speech. Melissa drifted over, slipping her arm through his, the picture of supportive wife. "Honestly, Conrad, the heat over there in July is brutal, and those cobblestone streets with your hip the way it is, you'd be miserable. We were actually going to suggest you sit this one out anyway." "My hip is fine. I walked 4 miles every morning. The cardiologist at Mass General 2 weeks ago told me I had the heart of a 50-year-old. But to my son's wife, I was a frail prop. She had decided to retire." Renee, the agent, cleared her throat. She had not stopped looking at me. "Sir, I can absolutely check availability on this flight. We do have 1 seat in business class still showing open. If you'd like, I can put it on a card right now." No, Patrick cut in fast. Too fast. Pop doesn't have his card on him. He left his wallet at home. And honestly, the stress of an international flight on short notice with his memory the way it's been, I don't want him stuck in a hospital in Frankfurt. "We'll FaceTime you from the villa, all right, Pop? You can be there with us in spirit." My memory the way it's been. I had not missed a single line item on a balance sheet in 50 years. I had memorized every closing date, every commission split, every face of every man who ever tried to short me on a deal. But to Patrick, I was a man with a foggy brain who was best left at home with the television on Channel 7. He clapped me on the shoulder. The weight of it felt like a verdict. "Just take an Uber back, all right? Or call Ellen's old driver. What's his name?" "Marco, the house'll be quiet for 2 weeks. You can finally watch all those westerns you keep talking about." He winked. He actually winked. A skycap appeared, took Melissa's 2 suitcases off my hands, and tossed them onto the belt. They disappeared behind the rubber flaps without a sound. Patrick grabbed Melissa's hand, gathered up the boarding passes, called for the kids, and started walking toward security. Haley turned around once. Her eyes were wet. She mouthed something to me. I think it was, "I'm sorry." Then her father pulled her along. I stood there. The agent, Renee, she leaned across the counter. Quietly, like she was sharing a secret in church, she said, "Sir, are you all right? Can I get you some water? Do you want me to call somebody?" I blinked. I straightened my back. The slump I had been carrying for 2 months, ever since Patrick first pitched me on this trip, lifted right off my shoulders like a wet coat coming off in a foyer. "I'm fine, ma'am," I said. "Better than I've been in a long time, actually." I walked out the same automatic doors I came through. The air outside was thick with jet fuel and Boston humidity. I stood on the curb and pulled out my phone. I scrolled past Patrick's contact, past Melissa's, and I tapped a number I hadn't dialed in almost a year. "Mr. Whitaker." The voice was rough, gravelly, 60-some years of cigarettes and Worcester winters. "Aren't you supposed to be on a plane?" "Plans changed, Marco. I need you at Logan. Terminal E, curbside." "And Marco, bring the Lincoln, not the SUV." "The Lincoln." There was a pause. He understood. Marco had driven for me for 34 years. He had driven my wife to her chemo appointments. He had driven Patrick to his first day of Boston College. He'd seen things. 20 minutes, sir. I sat down on the bench by the cab stand. I watched a young father lift his daughter onto his shoulders. I watched a mother kiss her grown son goodbye like it was the last time she would ever see him. I felt nothing. Not anger, not yet. Just a clean, cold kind of stillness, the way the harbor goes flat right before a nor'easter rolls in. The Lincoln pulled up. Marco stepped out, took my duffel without a word, opened the back door. I slid into the leather seat, and the city of Boston disappeared behind smoked glass. Home, sir. Yeah, Marco. Take the long way. I need to think. We rolled up Storrow Drive with the Charles River sparkling on the left and the Back Bay rooftops rising on the right. Patrick had told me 2 years ago I should sell the Lincoln. He said it was an old man's car. He said I should put the money in some crypto fund his buddy was running. I told him I'd sold it. I lied. I'd kept it in a heated garage in Brookline, paid Marco a retainer to keep it tuned, and never said another word about it. We pulled into the driveway of the brownstone Ellen and I bought in 1981. 5 floors, original molding, the kind of staircase you only see in old movies. Patrick and Melissa had moved into the top 2 floors after their second kid was born, just temporarily, Pop, while we get our feet under us. That was 9 years ago. They paid no rent. They contributed nothing to property tax. Melissa had redecorated their floors twice on my dime. I let myself in through the side entrance. The house was empty. The cleaning lady had the week off. The whole world had been cleared out so my family could enjoy their Italian vacation in peace on my money. I went straight to the study. Ellen and I had finished it together in '88. Cherry Shells, a partner's desk that came out of a law firm in Springfield when they went under. I had never let Patrick into this room. I told him there was nothing in there but tax records. There were tax records. There were tax records. There was also everything else. I sat down in front of the iMac. I was retired sure. I'd handed Patrick the title of vice president at Whitaker Holdings 6 years ago. But vice president in our family was ceremonial. It got him a salary, a parking spot, and the right to put it on his LinkedIn. The actual operating control, the signature authority, the wire approvals, those still ran through me. He didn't know that. He thought he'd been quietly taking over for years. He hadn't. I'd been letting him play CEO in a sandbox while I held the deeds. I pulled up the bank portal. 6 accounts. I'd sent Patrick $95,000 2 weeks ago for the trip. The receipts started loading. 5 round-trip business-class tickets, Boston to Florence via Frankfurt, $48,000. Villa rental in Chianti for 14 nights, $27,000. So far, so good. Then the rest. Mercedes Sprinter rental with private driver, $9,000. 3 different cooking schools, $4,000. A guided wine tour of Montalcino, $2,000 more. Add it up, you're around $90,000. $5,000 in his pocket as cushion. I started clicking. The American Express Centurion I had given him for business emergencies 4 years ago. He'd been authorized for up to $50,000 a month. I checked the pending charges. A jewelry store in the Back Bay yesterday. $18,000. A Cartier necklace, the description said. For Melissa, a trip surprise. A men's boutique in Newton. $2,200 for a linen suit. Italian lessons by some private tutor in Wellesley, $800. A reservation deposit at the Hotel Splendido in Portofino, an extra side trip that wasn't on my itinerary. $11,000. My son was bleeding me out, and the trip hadn't even started. But that wasn't what made my hands go cold. I clicked into the shared family iCloud, the one Melissa had set up so the kids could store their school photos. Patrick had logged into it from his MacBook 2 days ago. I saw his recent files, a folder labeled Dad Q3 Items. I clicked. There was a draft of a letter to Mass General, a request for an evaluation of cognitive decline in patient Conrad J. Whitaker. The intake form was filled out by Patrick. Dates of incidents he claimed to have observed. Times I'd forgotten his daughter's name. Times I'd wandered in the kitchen. None of it had happened. There was a second document, a draft motion prepared by some firm called Coppinger and Rees for a temporary conservatorship of the person and estate of Conrad J. Whitaker. Patrick had filled in his own name as the petitioning conservator. He had power of attorney for medical decisions, a document I had signed in 2018 when Ellen got sick, and I needed someone to be able to sign hospital paperwork if I went down too. He was preparing to use it. There was a third document. An LOI, a letter of intent, from a firm in Stamford called Marsh Ridge Capital. They were offering $28 million for the controlling interest in Whitaker Holdings. The firm was worth, conservatively, well north of 110. Patrick had written in the cover note, "Father's deteriorating condition makes this the right window. Closing must occur before October. Need wire instructions immediately." He was going to sell my company for 25 cents on the dollar, declare me incompetent, and put me in a memory care facility. He was going to do it while I was supposed to be alone in this empty brownstone, watching John Wayne movies. I leaned back in the chair. The leather creaked. There was a photograph on the desk of Ellen, taken on Cape Cod the summer before her diagnosis. She was laughing at something the photographer had said, her hand up to her mouth, her hair coming out of the bun. I looked at her for a long time. "Ellie," I said out loud. The room was so quiet I could hear the radiator click. "I tried, sweetheart, I really did. 23 years of him being a man, and I kept paying his way, hoping he'd grow into the kind of person you and I raised him to be. I think we have to admit something. He didn't." I picked up the phone. I called Donna Vasquez. Donna had been my corporate counsel for 19 years. She was the kind of attorney who'd been told no in 3 federal courts and never once flinched. "Connie, aren't you in Tuscany?" "Donna, listen carefully. I need you in my study within the hour. Bring the original operating agreement for Whitaker Holdings. Bring the unrevoked power of attorney. Bring a notary, and start drafting a full revocation of Patrick's POA, an immediate suspension of his signing authority on every account, and a letter to Marsh Ridge Capital informing them that any LOI signed by Patrick Whitaker is fraudulent, and any attempt to consummate that transaction will be met with a federal complaint." A pause. "Connie, that's the nuclear protocol. I know what it is." "You sure?" I looked at the photograph of Ellen. "Donna, my son is preparing to have me declared incompetent and locked in a facility so he can sell our family's company for 1/4 of its value. I want him to understand by the end of this week that the only thing senile in this house is the wallpaper in the back bedroom, and even that has more sense than he does." She didn't laugh. She knew me well enough to know I wasn't joking. "I'll be there in 40 minutes. I hung up. I went upstairs. I walked past the closet full of cardigans and elastic waist khakis Melissa had encouraged me to wear so I would look more comfortable, more like a grandpa. I went all the way to the back, to a garment bag I hadn't unzipped since the hospital where Ellen passed. Inside was the dark navy suit I had worn to close every major deal of my career. Brioni, hand-stitched. Still fit. The shirt was crisp. The cufflinks were the silver ones with my late father's initials on them. I dressed slowly. I shaved. I trimmed my moustache. I looked in the mirror. The man who had stood on the curb at Logan holding a stranger's luggage was gone. The man looking back at me was the man Ellen had married. The man who had built things. I picked up the phone again. I dialed Catherine Mendel, my pilot. "Cat, how fast can you get the citation in the air?" 2 hours from a cold start, Mr. Whitaker. "Where to?" "Florence." She didn't even pause. "I'll file the flight plan now." I sat on the edge of the bed and laced up my Oxfords. Donna would meet me at Hanscom Field. The documents would be ready before we leveled off. I would sleep 4 hours over the Atlantic. I would land in Florence by midday local time, and Patrick would have no idea I was on the same continent. He had told me to go home. He hadn't told me which home. The flight was smooth. Donna and I worked the entire way, papers spread across the cabin table, a pot of black coffee between us. By the time we crossed the Italian coast, every credit card in Patrick's name was queued for cancellation. Every bank account was queued for freezing. His keycard to the Boston office had already been deactivated remotely, and the lawyer at Marsh Ridge Capital had received a polite but very firm letter from Donna informing him that any communication from Patrick Whitaker representing the company should be considered fraudulent until further notice. We landed at Peretola. A black Mercedes was waiting on the tarmac. I'd had my assistant in Boston make 2 calls to a contact I'd kept warm for almost 20 years, a man named Renzo Carbone, who managed several luxury properties in the Chianti Hills. The villa Patrick had rented, the 11-bedroom estate with the Cypress Drive and the infinity pool, Renzo owned it. He had built it. I had loaned him the money to buy the parcel back in 2007 when the Italian banks were squeezing him over a technicality. I carried that loan at 4% when the market rate was 11. He had never forgotten. "Connie," Renzo said when I called him from the car. "You said your son rented the house. What did he do?" I told him. "The whole thing. The airport. The conservatorship papers. The Marsh Ridge letter." He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Connie, I have a guest house on the same property. 1/2 kilometer from the main villa, behind the olive grove. Your son does not know it exists. The view of the main house from the upstairs balcony is excellent. There is a key under the lemon tree on the patio. The wine cellar is stocked. Stay as long as you need. Renzo, there's one more thing. Anything. My son is paying for the villa with my credit card. The card stops working tonight." A short, sharp laugh from the other end. "Then I will need to tell him the bank flagged the payment. I will need to ask him to provide alternate payment by tomorrow morning, or I will, regrettably, need to have my staff move them out of the house. The property is booked by another guest the day after." "Is it really?" "It is now." I checked into the guest house around 5 in the afternoon. The light over the Tuscan hills was the gold color my wife used to try to describe to me when she came back from her one trip to Italy in 1906. I understood now what she had been trying to say. I made myself a small dinner. Bread, a wedge of pecorino, a glass of Brunello from Renzo's cellar. I sat on the upstairs balcony with a pair of marine binoculars, and I watched the main villa through the cypress trees. They were on the back terrace. All of them. Patrick was holding a glass of red wine and talking too loudly. Melissa had changed into a long white dress and was posing near the railing for some photo Haley was taking on her phone. The 2 younger kids were splashing in the pool. They looked for a moment like a normal, happy family. Then Patrick's phone rang. I watched him put it to his ear. His face changed. He turned away from the others. He started walking toward the far end of the terrace, away from the kids, gesturing with his free hand. I couldn't hear him from where I was, but I could read the body language. Confusion. Then panic. Then the kind of red-faced anger you only see in men who have just realized their fortress walls are made of paper. Melissa noticed. She drifted over to him. They had a hushed argument. Melissa stomped one foot. Patrick yelled something. Haley looked away, looked at the kids in the pool, pretended not to see. I lowered the binoculars. I made my first phone call. "Hello, this is Conrad Whitaker. I'm calling to confirm my reservation at the Hotel Splendido in Portofino made by Patrick Whitaker on my Centurion card. Yes, the deposit. I'd like to cancel it. Yes, all of it. The card was reported stolen this morning." I waited 5 minutes. I made the second call. "Yes, this is Conrad Whitaker. I'm calling about the Sprinter van rental and driver service contracted through your company. I'd like to cancel that as well, effective immediately." The card was unauthorized. I waited 5 more minutes. I made the third call. By the time I had called every single vendor on Patrick's itinerary, my son had made 14 calls to my cell phone. He was leaving voicemails, long ones. I didn't listen to any of them. I went downstairs and ate a slow piece of pecorino with honey and went to bed at 9. The next morning I got dressed in a charcoal suit, no tie, open collar. I had Marco, who had flown over the night before on a commercial flight, drive me up to the main villa at 10 in the morning sharp. I walked through the gate. Renzo's groundskeeper saw me and tipped his hat. I walked up the gravel drive. The cypress trees threw long shadows across the path. I climbed the front steps. I knocked on the heavy wooden door. Patrick opened it. He was barefoot. He hadn't shaved. His shirt was wrinkled. He had circles under his eyes. He stared at me like I was a ghost. "Pop, good morning, son." "What? What are you? How did you? May I come in?" He didn't move, so I walked past him. The kitchen smelled like burnt coffee. Melissa was at the counter in a silk robe, no makeup, hair piled on top of her head. When she saw me, her mouth opened and stayed opened. The Cartier necklace, the $18,000 one, was lying on the counter next to a half-eaten piece of toast. "Conrad," she said. Then she said it again. "Conrad." Haley came down the stairs. She stopped on the landing. She covered her mouth with both hands. And then, this is the part that mattered, she ran down the rest of the stairs and threw her arms around me. She held on. She didn't say anything. She just held on. I patted her back and gently moved her aside. I turned to Patrick. "I understand the credit cards have been giving you some trouble," I said. "Pop, I can explain. I understand the reservation got crossed up at the airport too. Pop, and I understand Marsh Ridge Capital was expecting a signed LOI from you by the end of this week for the sale of the company, $28 million. Which is interesting, Patrick, because the company isn't yours to sell." His face went white. Properly white. The kind of white that means the body has decided to shut down certain non-essential systems. "Melissa, this is the part I'll never forget." Melissa pivoted on a dime. She came around the counter, eyes welling up on demand, and she reached for my hand. "Conrad, oh my God, I had no idea. I told him this was wrong. I begged him not to." I pulled my hand back. "Melissa, the wire transfer from our shared account to the deposit at Marsh Ridge's New York office, the one for $30,000 to retain their counsel, was authorized by you. Your electronic signature is on it. So when I say I know, I want you to understand that I know." Her face collapsed. The tears stopped instantly. She stepped back like I'd slapped her. I sat down at the kitchen table. I motioned for Patrick to sit across from me. He did. Melissa stayed standing, frozen. Haley was watching from the doorway. The two younger kids were still asleep upstairs. "Patrick," I said, "I'm going to give you a choice. I'm only going to give it to you once, so I want you to listen with both ears." He nodded. He couldn't speak. Option 1. We fly home tomorrow. I file a complaint with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Massachusetts. The charges, my counsel tells me, will likely include attempted grand larceny, conspiracy to commit elder fraud, and forgery, because I've also seen the medical authorization you tried to file with Mass General last week, and that's a felony in Massachusetts. You will spend, my counsel estimates, between 4 and 7 years in federal custody. Your wife will likely face conspiracy charges as well. Your children will be raised by someone else. Haley made a small sound from the doorway. Option 2. You sign 3 documents I have in this folder. The first is a full revocation of every power of attorney you currently hold over me, medical and financial. The second is a resignation from Whittaker Holdings, effective immediately, with a non-compete and a non-disparagement clause attached. The third is a relocation agreement. You and Melissa and the children will move out of the brownstone on Mount Vernon Street within 30 days. You will find your own apartment. You will pay your own rent. I have arranged a job for you at a friend's logistics warehouse in Quincy. Forklift certification, third shift, starting wage, $22 an hour. You will work that job for 18 months without missing a shift. Melissa, you will get a job too. I don't care where. I will check. Patrick was crying now. Quiet tears. The kind men cry when they finally understood something. At the end of 18 months, if you have held that job, paid your own rent, and not asked me for a single cent, I will consider speaking to you about your future. Not before. If at any point you contact Marsh Ridge Capital or any other entity in connection with our family's business, the federal complaint goes to the U.S. Attorney's Office that afternoon. I slid the folder across the table. Haley, I said, without taking my eyes off Patrick. Sweetheart, go upstairs and pack your things. You're staying with me. Bowdoin starts in August and we have a lot to talk about before then. The rest of you have until 5 p.m. to be off this property. The villa is no longer yours. The driver is gone. The cards are gone. There's a regional bus to Florence at 6. From Florence, you can buy economy tickets home. Coach, with your own money. We don't have money, Melissa whispered. You have a Cartier necklace on the counter, I said. I'd suggest a pawn shop in Florence. Beer de Pepe, I'm told, has several reputable ones. Patrick picked up the pen. His hand was shaking. He looked at the documents. He looked at me. For a second, just a second, I saw the boy I used to take to Fenway. The boy who used to fall asleep against my shoulder on the T-ride home. I felt that. I want you to know I felt it. I didn't let it show. He signed. All 3. His signature was unsteady, but it was real. I gathered the documents. I stood up. I looked at Melissa. You should know, I said, that the prenuptial agreement Patrick signed before your wedding is enforceable in Massachusetts. You have no claim to the brownstone, the company, or any assets predating your marriage. Whatever happens between the two of you from here is between the two of you. From here is between the two of you. I'm done bankrolling either side of it. I looked at Patrick one last time. Your mother loved you very much, I said. I want you to remember that. She isn't here to see this, and that's the only mercy in the room today. I turned. I walked out. Haley was already at the top of the stairs with a small duffel bag, and from the look on her face, she had packed it before I'd even arrived. She came down. She slipped her hand into mine the way she used to when she was 4. Marco was at the gate with the car door open. We drove away through the cypresses. The morning sun cut through the dust the tires kicked up. Haley was quiet for a long time, looking out the window. Then she said, "Pop, pop. Yeah, sweetheart. I heard them on the plane. I heard what they were planning. I tried to call you from the airport bathroom, but my dad took my phone." I looked at her. The strawberry shampoo, the eyes that were so much like Ellen's. "That was you on the missed calls." She nodded. "I'm sorry I didn't try harder." "Haley, baby, you tried plenty." We sat with that for a few miles. The hills rolled by, gold and green, the same hills my wife had once described to me from a magazine clipping on our refrigerator door. I reached over and squeezed my granddaughter's hand. "Listen," I said, "I lost a son today. I'm not going to pretend that doesn't hurt. But I think I had already lost him a long time ago, and today I just stopped paying not to know it. There's a difference between losing something and finally setting it down." She nodded. She wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist. "What do we do now, Pop Pop?" I looked out at the road ahead. "Now," I said, "we take the long way home. There's a little town up near Siena your grandmother circled in red pen on a map in 1996. She always wanted to see it. I never took her. I think it's about time somebody from this family did." Marco caught my eye in the rearview mirror. He tipped his head just slightly, the way he had 1,000 times over 34 years. He turned the wheel and pointed the Lincoln south into the Chianti Hills, away from the villa, away from the airport, away from the airport, away from every version of my life that had ended that morning at curbside check-in at Logan International. The cypresses lined the road like sentries, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt like a man who had finally stopped carrying somebody else's luggage. If you've ever had to choose between your dignity and a relationship that was draining the life out of you, I want to hear about it in the comments. Tell me what you did. Tell me what you wish you had done. Hit that subscribe button if you believe respect is something a son owes his father, not the other way around. And in the next story, I'll tell you what happened the first time Patrick called me from a payphone in Quincy 6 months later, asking for help. The answer might surprise you. It surprised me. I've had a long time to sit with what happened that morning at Logan, and I want to tell you what I've come to understand about it, because I think it matters more than the trip, more than the money, more than even the look on Patrick's face when he opened the door of that villa and saw me standing there in my father's cufflinks. For 43 years, I told myself I was being a good father by saying yes. Yes to the down payment. Yes to the second car. Yes to the credit card with no spending cap. Yes to letting him and Melissa live rent-free on the top 2 floors of a brownstone in one of the most expensive zip codes in America. I thought that's what love looked like. I thought a father's job was to remove every obstacle from his son's path so the boy could fly. What I didn't understand, and Ellen tried to tell me 100 times before she got sick, is that a child who never meets an obstacle never grows wings. He grows a sense of entitlement that eventually turns into contempt for the very person who paved the road. That's the cause and effect I missed. I built Patrick a life with no friction, and friction is what builds a man. Without it, he became soft in the places that matter, and hard in the places that shouldn't be hard at all. By the time he was 43, he could look his own father in the eye at a curbside check-in and tell him to go home and not feel a single thing about it, because I had spent 4 decades teaching him that I would always pay the bill and disappear when I wasn't useful. I want you to understand something. The strongest thing I did that day wasn't cancelling the credit cards. It wasn't flying to Florence. It wasn't the folder of documents I slid across that kitchen table. The strongest thing I did was finally tell the truth to him and to myself about what love had actually been doing in our family. Real love is honest. Real love makes you uncomfortable when you need to grow. Real love sometimes looks from the outside like the hardest thing you've ever done. If you're a father or a mother or a grandparent watching this, and you've been writing checks to keep the peace with someone who's been treating you like a wallet with a face, I want you to hear me. Your dignity is not a luxury. It is the foundation under everything else you have ever built. The day you set it down to keep someone in your life is the day they stop seeing you as a person. They start seeing you as a resource. And resources get used up. I lost a son the day I stopped paying. That's the truth. But I gained back the man my wife married, and I gained a granddaughter who saw her grandfather stand up straight for the first time in her life. Haley starts at Bodon in 3 weeks. We have breakfast together every Sunday. She tells me about her classes. I tell her about her grandmother. And I sleep through the night now. I hadn't done that in years.